Hi, this is Peter Wingfield. I play Mythos on Highlander, and you're listening to The Blood of Kings.
Welcome, Highlander fans, to Blood of Kings, a Highlander podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. On this show, we cover everything from the Highlander Universe, you know, the movies, TV series, guest interviews, novels, all the fun stuff that we love about Highlander. But this is a special one here. This is Blood of Kings, Carl Robinson, Run for Your Life, and Manhunt, with a very special guest that you guys will probably remember. And more, of course. I'm Kevin, your Blood of Kings host. But please welcome my co-host, Mr. Lee Fillingson. Lee, how are you?
You know, I'm feeling pretty good. Things are quieting down here a little bit in Minneapolis. So glad to be back on Blood of Kings, doing what I love.
Yeah, it's been a while, man. It's good to have you. We recently had the interviews that I had with Peter Wingfield and David Abramowitz and Jim Burns. And then, of course, we had our friend Jonathan Melville on talking about the history of Highlander, 1986 Highlander, our home video. But it's nice to be back and stuff. But I got to get your help with something here, Lee. I'm feeling a little awkward. You know how when you have your new girlfriend, and she's, you know, she's really hot and all that kind of stuff. But then you got your ex-girlfriend.
The skanky one?
What's that?
The skanky one?
Yeah. The skanky one, but still hot, still hot. And then you guys meet and it gets weird and awkward. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, totally. But I know I'm hotter, so it's okay.
Okay, that's true. That's true. You're like the new girlfriend here. But you know what? We have my old co-host and of course old co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network, Mr. Norman Lao. How are you?
So it's funny. I'm good, but it's funny that I'm coming back to the Fandom Podcast Network after we did a podcast on Scott Pilgrim, which was specifically about the warning signs of having your exes meet. So let me just preface that right now for the show, because you have just summoned up one of your 7, I don't know, hopefully you'll go through 7 podcast hosts, but 7 deadly exes, at least one deadly ex, or maybe somewhat of an aggravated ex.
Norm, I'm a little insecure. What if you guys take over and you don't like me on Blood of Kings anymore? What if you guys decide to do the hosting and not me?
Oh, then we'll have our own show.
Here's what I gotta say. Mr. Reitzel's name starts with a K.
It does.
And we know what that means in the Highlander world. He's a bad guy. You're not fooling anybody there, Reitzel.
My life expectancy is not expected well in the immortal world. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, pretty much.
I'll tell you what. I'll take one for the team. I'll chop him down, and then you can take his head, and then you and I will have our show. So
sounds like a plan, man.
Yeah,
have our own spin.
Oh, this is gonna be fun. Well, anyway, first of all, it's good to be back with you, Lee. But Norm, we had to have you on again. We want the Blood of Kings fans, and listeners, they want to know what you've been up to. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. But we're talking about Carl Robinson, one of our favorite immortals from the television series. He was in 2 episodes, Run for Your Life and Manhunt, and we're going to talk about the reason why we're talking about that, because this was your choice. You brought it to the table. Norman. But before we do that, though, we want to thank all of our fans for supporting the show. And if you'd like to get in touch with us online, here is how. You can find Blood of Kings, the master feed, on the Fandom Podcast Network, which is fpnet.podbean.com. We're also on the Podbean app. Fandom Podcast Network is also on Apple Podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. And also, you can find Blood of Kings on Twitter and Instagram. Also, we've got a wonderful Facebook group called Blood of Kings, a Highlander fandom group. If you are a Highlander fan, please head on over there and we will let you in. We also have a sister page, Blood of Kings Highlander CCG collectible card game and gaming discussion group page. You can also email us at bloodykingspodcast@gmail.com. My name is Kevin. I am on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix. Lee, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at The Way of the Way, just underscore in between The Way of the Way on Instagram. And hit me up on social media. You'll probably get sick of all my posts, but I usually accept the friend requests.
Very cool. And Norman, where can we find you on social media and what are you up to?
So funny. Like my list of credits has changed since I've been here. So I'm going to have to like forget like all of the stuff that I memorized up until this point. Cause you and I used to roll like right into this. What are your Twitters, what are your Instagrams, all that kind of stuff.
That's right.
So recently I've been, well, not so recently, since January of this year, 2020, which was still a good month. In 2020.
It was.
It only had Australia on fire. The rest of the world was fine.
We're just like, if that's all we got, then we're doing good. Okay. So on social media, you can find me on the Mission Log Podcast Twitter handle at Mission Log Pod. That's the new gig that I'm doing with John Champion. And that is for Roddenberry.com, where we talk about pretty much every single episode in Star Trek in order, week for week. Studying the morals, meanings, and messages of that episode of Star Trek. And right now, by the time this recording released, we should be either finished with season 4 of Deep Space Nine or just starting season 5 of Deep Space Nine. So we'll go season 5, season 6, season 7, and then into Voyager, and then into Enterprise, and we'll see what happens after that. And then you can also find me on social media across Twitter and Instagram at Lounge Lizard. That's my last name, LaungeLizard. And that's pretty much it.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, there's two ways you can support Blood of Kings and the Fandom Podcast Network. First of all, with Apple Podcast and iTunes reviews, please leave us a rated review there. Search Fandom Podcast Network. And then if you like what you're listening to here on Blood of Kings, please leave us a review. We love 5 stars, of course, but we love feedback in general. Also, we have a TeePublic store. Help support the Fandom Podcast Network and Blood of Kings. Get your own Blood of Kings t-shirt and other apparel. Please visit our Blood of Kings store there and just search Fandom Podcast Network or Blood of Kings. All right. We've got some stuff to chat about in Joe's, so let's head on into Joe's. All right. Now, Lee, we got to ask our guest, Norm, you have not been to Joe's in a while. Where would you like to go?
Oh, I think you know where we want to go. We want to go back to our normal corner table right next to the doors. Where we all
go.
Right?
Yeah, and what are you ordering? Come on, you always order something. You always came up with something good.
Well, the last 30 days I've been highly unsuccessful trying to detox myself, so I'm going to stick with one of my usual favorites. And we're talking about the South here a little bit, so I think I'll do a little bit of Kentucky bourbon. I don't know what do I like. Little Knob Creek, little Maker's Mark, little old Forester, maybe, somewhere around those lines.
What about you, Lee? What would you be hit?
I was going to have Scotch, but I think I'm going to be joining Norman. I'm going to go for a little Basil Hayden's.
Very nice. Very nice. All right, guys. Okay, so just real quick, the as you guys know, the Seacouver tour for 2020 has been canceled, like all kinds of other events. But I do know that it'll probably be happening again next year. That's, of course, with Andy Sloan. So make sure you check with him on that. I highly recommend that. That is a lot of fun. And the SOAR experiences, too, are slowly going to start posting again, whether it's going to be for the end of this year or next year. But because of the whole COVID thing, a lot of these have been canceled, but make sure you check that out at swordxp.com and also check out Sword Experience Participants. That's with an X, and SXP, this Ultimate Sword Experience, for more information, because those are great fan pages there. You can share your experiences there and get a lot of questions answered there. But we want to catch up with Norman, and feel free to jump in anytime here, Lee. But Lee, Norman, I want to ask you real quick about your Star Trek podcast, because I've been listening to Mission Log for years now, and they've been going on for years. They started with the original series, episode by episode. They did the animated series, did the original series movies, then jumped into Next Gen, did the Next Gen movies. Now they're doing Deep Space Nine, and you've jumped in recently. This probably is one of the most, if not the most popular Star Trek podcast out there because of its format just really seems to work. What was it about Mission Log that attracted you to filling in that new co-host spot?
Well, to be honest with you, I never actually sought out the Mission Log co-host chair to begin with, per se. When Ken Ray decided to leave, they decided to do an audition for that slot. I was very comfortable with my development of the Babylon 5 podcast that I do with my friend Charlotte Schmidt, called The Zocalo, because Babylon 5 is my favorite show. And I'm sorry, Highlander fans. I've said this before on Blood of Kings. I did, so I'm not being a hypocrite. But, I have been developing that over the last 2.5 years. And then John Champion, who is the co-host now along with me, he reached out to me and he said, "Do you want to audition?" And at first I didn't want to. I'll be honest with you. I didn't want to, because I know how important that chair is to a lot of people, especially for the people who are listening to that show for the last 7.5 years. I mean, Ken and John had a great dynamic between the two of them. They brought really good, interesting personalities and discussion points in the way they approached breaking down the episodes. So I wasn't sure if I was ready to take that kind of a chair. It's kind of like Riker getting convinced by Guinan to take the chair after Picard got stolen by the Borg. It's intimidating. That chair is intimidating because you are now linked with the Roddenberry name and legacy. So it has a lot of eyes on it and a lot of ears on it. But I felt that if not now, then when? And then it's just something that my dad told me years ago, before he passed away. And he said, don't ever look back on a decision that you've made regretting that you didn't go and take that chance. So it's been very good to me. I mean, it's brought me a lot of notoriety, both positive and negative, I'll be honest, because Star Trek fans, as you know, have a billion different opinions. And you just have to kind of weather the storm of all those opinions, because I'm not going to be 100% right and they're not going to be 100% wrong. You just have to kind of continue the conversation. As I've said before on Blood of Kings, we just continue the conversation, man, because if we don't, then we're not sharing any fun, right?
That's a good point. Go ahead, Lee.
I was going to say, I can really sympathize with you on the filling of big shoes. I've been a fan of the show. This relationship, that turned into me being a co-host, has been started with me kind of writing you a letter after the Swords of season 1. I'm like, okay, here's a couple things that it was just like minor weird things that I knew because I studied military history. And then, you started training with RJ at South Coast Swords. And we kind of kept in contact. And when you stepped down, Kevin asked me to be on the show, and I'm like, yeah, cool. This is great. And, when he asked me to join on as a co-host, I'm like, okay, this is cool, but a little intimidating because I don't have the beautiful dulcet tones of Norman C. Lao when I'm on the podcast. And as a fan, I'm listening to you guys talk, and I've been, co-hosting now for a few months. I feel like I'm supposed to be listening to you too, instead of actually conversing with you. Because you guys have been in my head, on the various podcasts for a few years, and I do, very much appreciate the legacy that you guys started, and I'm, couldn't be a bigger fan of yours, Norm. And
thank you.
I'm really proud to be in the seat that you kind of set for me. So, this is cool. I'm sorry it took so long for all three of us to talk like this, but I'm really excited. As a fan of the show that I'm a host on, I'm fanning out right now because I got you two together and I get to chat with you.
Oh, that's so awesome! And you know what? You're right. When we first started conversing, it's pretty much about swords. And believe me, folks, when I say that, Lee's Academia in Swords is remarkable because it's well researched. It's obviously well experienced, and you're a teacher as well. So it's nice to be able to kind of come together and talk about those similar experiences, because I'm just a novice student to a lot of this stuff. You've been actively doing this for your life. I know based on what you have written and what you've told us, you have moved to certain parts of the world to pursue this passion. And I find that absolutely incredible. And I think that when Kevin said, Norm, I'm thinking about bringing Lee on as a co-host, I mean, Kevin, I'm not lying. I was like, that's a great idea. I think that would be a perfect fit because you have been with us for so long as an active fan and participant, but also because you can bring this knowledge of history and your personal passion for Highlander into it also. And that's what we want to do. We want to bring that passion through the microphone. If we're not genuine about that, then it's just kind of like pablum, with the audience. You're just like kind of like going through the motions. So yeah, I think that's it was a great fit. And here we are, and I'm glad you're right. I'm glad that we can all come together at least once. Neither of us, I don't think, are immortal as far as I can tell. I mean, I could stab myself and see if I bleed out, but I don't want to. So
yeah, I'm not rolling those dice anytime soon, my friends.
Norm, before we head out of Joe's, I just wanted to ask you, what are you doing for fun? With this whole COVID thing that's happening. I know, like you're doing some working from home as well. Mm-hmm. But what are you watching on TV? Marathoning? What else are you doing to entertain yourself?
Well, I mean, I'm watching a lot of Star Trek Voyager. I did not know I was going to get so into it because when Star Trek Voyager first came out, I saw it like plastered across the media. UPN was doing a huge marketing push, and then it was like in that perfect storm of too much TNG on TV, too much Deep Space Nine on TV, too many movies getting pushed out in the theaters, and then Voyager comes out, and I'm like, I'm done with it. I'm just done with Star Trek. But 25 years later, I started watching it, thanks to Shar, because she kept pushing me in one direction. She's like, you really got to check out these couple of episodes, and I fell in love with it. So I just started season 4. Yes, it's easy to watch 7 of 9, folks. I know, but believe it or not, I liked it. I'm not going to say I liked it more.
I think it's a very underrated show. It's had good writing, and the cast starts to gel really well. I'm a big fan of Voyager.
I love it. I think it's fantastic. I think it's it was easy. It was easy to digest, but then again, sometimes when you separate yourself from fandom for a while, you change, you grow, and either in the background of the fandom or aside from the fandom, and you want to come back. It's kind of like with anything. If you and I'm going to use bacon as the example because me, I love bacon. But if you just eat bacon, yeah, it's amazing. But it turns out that you just the best of the best thing in the world all the time no longer becomes the best, and it just becomes routine. And when you don't have it as special in your life as, say, something with bacon on it, which is a surprise, or I haven't had bacon in a while because my doctor said so. Then you have like just a slice of it. You're like, man, that is good. Right? Man, that is good. And that's what Star Trek is now to me. But aside from that, though, thanks to Netflix, I got into Community, which I never watched, which I think is hilarious. Right?
I love that show so much. And I have a weird connection to that. The community college I went to years ago, there actually is a bronze statue. It is me. It's not dedicated to me, but I was the subject for the statue for the Millennium. And so me and Luis Guzman have statues at our community colleges.
Were you able to do anything as fun as like in a full-on like paintball war across campus? Because that's amazing.
We didn't do that, but my predecessor on the student council got removed and expelled because he, without anybody else's permission, arranged a violent femmes concert on campus. And when they came asking for the money, to get set up, the entire administration went crazy. Like nobody approved this. And so I ended up taking his job the next year. Weird. It's a theme of me taking people's jobs this season, I guess. But we did that. It was mostly lame. It was mostly me just hanging around. I was kind of a Vaughn, just a weird dude playing guitar everywhere, kind of clueless. But I had a lot of fun. It was.
Are you saying he has small nipples that we can make fun of?
Freaky small nipples, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just saying for all you community fans out there, you know what I'm talking about, right? On that note,
I'm still waiting for the movie. We got our 6 seasons. So.
And a movie. You're right.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. Well, Norm, thank you so much for catching us up with what's happening with you. And real quick on your Babylon 5, people can still find that where?
Well, you can find us on YouTube. So the show that I do with my co-host Charlene Schmidt, we do it every Sunday at 4 p.m. Pacific time, which is because I'm the West Coast, and then we do it live. It's a live chat. We prepare our subject matter. We try and advertise that on the Zocalo. That's Zocalo live cast. That's on Twitter, and then people will join in and they will chat about it. So the last topic that we did was about kind of like what's going on with the world and what you can do about it. Because there's a certain political theme that happened in Babylon 5 with kind of like the rise of a totalitarian government under President Clark and his secret police enforcement group called the Night Watch. Now, you can draw your own conclusions from that, or you could go to our website and check us out and listen to it. So you can grab up our numbers.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, we got a lot to get into, so let's head on out of Joe's. All right, welcome back to Blood of Kings here. We're talking Carl Robinson. We're talking about his 2 episodes that his character was in. Season 2 episode of Run for Your Life and Season 5 episode of Manhunt with our special guest, Norman Lao. Now, Norman, when I was asking you to come back on Blood of Kings, I basically said, what do you want to talk about? And he says, I want to talk about Carl Robinson. Tell me why.
Well, I think that it's something that's it's important for us as podcasters to take a look at what's going on with the current events that are shaping our time right now. And we are living in historical making times. There are going to be changes that are going to be moving forward for better or ill, depends on what side of the congressional pen you're on. But there are changes that are going to be made. And, this recording is going to be probably published, maybe 3.5 weeks, Lee, is it, after the murder of George Floyd? About 3.5?
Yeah, we're coming up on 3 we're coming up on 3 on Monday.
Yeah.
It's weird. For everyone listening, I'm actually in Minneapolis. I've been part of a lot of the things. I was on the bridge when the truck came through. I helped people deal with being tear gassed. I've helped with rebuilding food distribution. My city, which, more than Minneapolis, is Twin Cities plus 30 different suburbs. It is a very strange and crazy place to be right now. What everyone's seeing on the news is very different in a lot of ways from what I'm seeing. I've actually been to 30th in Chicago, which is where he was killed. The community has blocked that area off. The 3rd Precinct did retreat from there, but the celebration that's going on down there, the way that the community comes together has been quite remarkable. It's as horrible as the things that we're seeing on the news. The ability for people to come together has been amazing. When this first started, I actually wrote to Kevin and Kyle because I was part of the outreach efforts and helping people out. But I would go into these neighborhoods, and as a enormous, scary white guy, a lot of people were nervous about me. And so I started wearing my Blood of King shirts and other stuff to identify me as somebody, local or somebody that, with the Blood of Kings, I say, hey, this is my podcast. You can look me up. If you think that I'm being a horrible person, you can call me out online. That engendered a lot of trust in the community, and places that I had never really been to are now places that are familiar to me, where people know me. And I'm noticing that with a lot of people of every color, of every walk of life. South Minneapolis is this very interesting place because it's very much small town and it's very much urban at the same time. It's a great place to be. And so when it's easy to focus on the absolutely horrible thing that happened at 30th in Chicago, but the love and support that people are showing for each other there gives me a little bit of hope that the changes that you're talking about, Norm, are going to be for the good, because there are many, many good people standing up for each other and going out into the streets and making sure that people's voices are heard, and that that people are safe. So sorry to hijack your
No, that's fine. I like the backdrop that you've given the conversation, because that's the reason why I chose these two episodes specifically for Run for Your Life, because Run for Your Life, I mean, Manhunt, yes, it's kind of like the coda of that episode. I mean, there's a bit of it that deals with Carl's flashbacks, but Run for Your Life, when I was watching it again, it reminded me a lot of kind of like the smaller city streets that I saw in the news of Minneapolis, where you can see a Carl Robinson or a Ricky, running from the police. And the reason why I wanted to choose, Run for Your Life specifically is because I was having a difficult time just mentally going through the catalog of immortals that came from slavery. And that's when Carl Robinson was born as an immortal. He was born from the violence of slavery, and he's been running ever since. And with the intervention of Duncan MacLeod, trying to be kind of like his mentor of hope and optimism through the course of his life, from when he saved him from the lynch mob, even though he wouldn't die. But the point is that he was going to get lynched anyway, to the flashback of him fighting injustice in the South, in the diner, and then finally seeing Carl Robinson in modern time, a la the 1990s, just becoming someone that's been so jaded and so bitter and has resolved himself to, hey, this is the way it's going to be. But aside from that particular thread, there is the narrative of the cop hunters, especially with Carter. Now, Carter is a watcher, yes, but without knowing that, there are so many scenes in that episode where Carter and his partner were running down Carl or Ricky. There was even a scene where Carter was about to beat Ricky to death without provocation, and his partner stopped him, which was a great scene to have, because you needed to have that the responsibility of a good police officer. But it's like over and over and over again in fandom, or even in fiction, you are seeing this stereotypical dynamic of white cop, black criminal, and no provocation. And I found that very interesting in this particular episode. What did you guys think?
Go ahead, Lee.
It's very hard not to watch that particular scene and not think about what happened in our city. I have a friend, Brianna Lee. She's a producer here in the cities. She had her purse stolen, and the Asian cop, Officer Tao, I believe his name is, was the one that helped her, and he was very nice to her. And she is blonder and bluer than I am, and until this, she thought, okay, that's a good cop. And then to watch his disinterest, in that, it was an eye-opening thing for her, because, and for a lot of people, but I think with this episode, the ability to stretch that far with the timeline of racism and how people are treated, going from that first lynching and into modern time, I think was a really a powerful statement, because was still going on. And I think one of the things that always attracted me to Highlander was that Duncan was what we, for whatever reason, insultingly call a social justice warrior. I think there's no better warrior to be in this world. Was always stepping in for Native Americans, for the Roma, or what people call gypsies, for freed slaves, for the little guy. I think that I probably would be doing something similar, but the example that I got from Duncan and stepping up for people, because he could have driven by and he could have said, yeah, Carl's going to live, but then there's the other three guys that were going to get hung.
I was thinking the exact same thing. It's like, he's an immortal. He may be better than me. I might just drive along, just move along. But what was amazing was that I felt like he was that intervention that needs to happen. He's that, like I said, like the moral compass is so strong, that needle is pointing right towards the problem, and he had to make a decision. And I think that's when you feel like, yeah, can I be that heroic? Can I be the point of intervention when something like that is going to happen? My friend Matt Egan, Matt Egan, right? Right, Kev?
Mm-hmm.
Lynch. He's actually making some local paper news because he involved himself defending somebody from racial attack at the gym that he belongs to. He was headbutted in the face, and the police are investigating it right now because he felt morally obligated to do so. He didn't know this other person, but he knew that the other person was spouting evil or spouting hate or spouting something that is just morally wrong. He felt morally obliged to do so. I know not everyone is going to be able to be comfortable with that, but that's the decision that I think that that Carl really held on to that kept him from just going completely the other way. It's like one person believed in him and he felt duty bound to make sure that that wasn't for nothing, I think.
You know, what I liked about this episode was that even though Carl Robinson is fiction, you know, and that a lot of Highlander revolves around flashbacks of real people. What I liked about this episode was that it lets you know that not only did this happen once to this fictional character, it happened to many, many, many other people and still does to a certain degree in a different factor. And one of the things that stood out to me was Carl Robinson, Bruce Young himself. Bruce Young was just, he's this tall, imposing man, but he is a fantastic actor. And you've seen him in a lot of things, like Basic Instinct, Risky Business, Jurassic Park 3. He was even Hot Shots as well. He really cared.
He started with Tom Selleck in one of my favorites called An Innocent Man. With F. Murray Abraham.
Yes,
oh, man, that's going back.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. But I wanted to real quick, I want to give a quick plot synopsis, and I want to mention something that John Mosby said in his book, Fearful Cemetery. Duncan saves immortal Carl Robinson from a lynching in 1926 Louisiana. Carl became a famous colored league baseball star with aspirations of becoming a politician, but he has since become disillusioned after seeing years of racism and corruption. He now lives on the streets and steals to get by. But when he steals Charlie's car to get away from drug dealers after stealing their money, Duncan tries to help him overcome his long-standing hatred of and distrust for whites, and he helps him deal with the racist cop who is after him. And just real quick background on the Carl character himself, that he was born in 1824 in New Orleans as a slave. In 1859, Carl's master, Seth Hobart, took his daughter out to the fields pregnant. She had apparently claimed that she had been raped by one of the slaves. She randomly pointed out Carl as the guilty party. Hobart shot Carl to death immediately, and then Carl revived shortly as an immortal. But there was something interesting here I think that we should discuss. In John Mosby's book, Run for Your Life is a blunt study of racism and how things change and sometimes, unfortunately, don't. It's initially easy for the viewer to think that Bruce A. Young's character, Carl Robinson, is somewhat of an inverted racist, blaming every single setback as due to his color rather than his confrontational attitude. But as the story progresses, we get a glimpse of how much skin pigmentation was and continues to be a prevailing factor in a way some people are treated. And I thought we could discuss on that real quick there, because even with Charlie, he's confrontational because, especially with Charlie's last name, DeSalvo, and he starts to question his African-Americanness, I guess, and he's a difficult person to like, Carl Robinson. He has reasons, but Duncan starts to kind of break that shell a little bit. And starting with you, Norman, I wanted to get your take on that.
I think that just goes to Carl's character, that he's very distrusting and he's very cynical, and it doesn't matter necessarily like what your color is. If you haven't proven yourself to him in some way, then he's going to be very skeptical of your intent. Now, he's the one who did Charlie wrong, and Charlie should have, he has every right to be, irate with Carl, to the point where, he's giving him a lot of lip. But, Carl just can't help himself but kind of push back and say, what kind of name is DeSalvo, man? Mm-hmm. And Charlie says man a lot in this episode, by the way. I don't know why, but not like later on in other episodes, there's not a lot of man going on. It's like, hey.
I mean, of course, he steals Charlie's car, so they're not off to a good start there. Hey, look, but Duncan says he grows on you.
First of all, that's not the first thing that Carl stole. The first thing that Carl stole was Luther's wardrobe. Okay, let's be honest.
The duster, right?
The duster, the blue shirt, the Manchu broadsword, the jeans, everything. I mean, he's pretty.
But I'm pretty sure Luther stole that from Lorenzo Lamas.
Oh yeah, it's true, right?
Because it's very renegade.
It's so totally renegade. Yeah, but it's so they're going through the wardrobe closet and just they're appropriating clothing. But yeah, he keeps people at a distance because I think, and going into this leads more into Manhunt. I think it's really, really hard for Carl to trust anybody after his own master, started going after him. He's like, who can I trust if not my own master, the man who taught me and the man who gave me a sense of purpose and a sense of reason. So, Charlie could have been an ally. He could have been a friend. He was, as he says, like, well, that's very, black of you, brother, but he's throwing the word black around like it's venom. Right. Mm. And it doesn't matter if, like I said, if you're a black brother that Charlie was, but he's not really because he is half Italian. So he's not really a brother to Carl. That's just how it is, though. Carl has a very hard shell about him. And it seems like the only person that can get through the walls that he put up is Mac. Because Mac's the guy who got to him, well, not necessarily first, got to him second, but made a lot of sense to him. It's just that Carl, as an immortal, he's living proof of one of two things. Either the system will never change no matter how long you live through it, or it will change because you have the ability to do something about it because you are living through it. So, he's always at that crossroad.
What about you, Lee? What do you think of that?
I think that kind of getting to where Carl is in this, speaking as a ginormous white guy, this isn't, anything that I've dealt with personally, but I do have friends that that are, African-American and mixed race. And my friends that are, as they would say, half black or mixed, there is that tension. And sometimes, and it's their story to tell. I'm probably going to do it wrong if I try to say it, but that tension does exist. And I think, again, the timeline that just shows what Carl has gone through, especially once we get the next episode. It does show that there is a very good reason for the distrust. There's a very good reason for the anger because, he saw the South lose. And he heard about the Emancipation Proclamation, and he's still seeing people lynched, in 1926. He's still not allowed to eat at the food counter in 1957 or 1958, whenever that is. There's a lot of good things that happened, and it's still, for a lot of people, it's still being a different class of citizen, without their permission. One of another young black man was killed in our city a few years ago, Philando Castile. He was shot in broad daylight. He had a permit to carry, asked for the permit, and shot him while he was reaching for the permit. Around the same time, I was coming back from a movie set where I had been the armorer and the bad guy. I was covered in stage blood. I had 4 prop assault rifles in the back seat, technically 2 machine pistols, 2 MP5s, 2 M4s, and one of the M4s had a grenade launcher on it. Now, they were props, they were non-firing. And when the cop pulled me over at 3:00 in the morning, he's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm an actor. That's stage blood." Sees the weapons. I'm like, "Oh yeah, they're props." And he's like, "Do you have any other weapons in the car?" I'm like, "Well, I do have my pistol on my hip." He's like, "Okay, can I see your permit?" Pistol's on the right hip, permit's in the right pocket in my wallet. I didn't get shot. Now, this is 3:00 in the morning. I am specifically hired to play bad guys because I'm physically imposing and terrifying. I am covered in blood, and there are multiple weapons in plain view. I should have at least been pulled out of the car. So that was when I knew that very clearly that things are different for me. And that's when I kind of started adding my voice to these situations. And, you know, I will say it's not every police officer. You know, I may have just found the good one that decided that I was trustworthy, but I know that I can't guess on that. Mm-hmm. And you know, when I see this timeline, you know, if you take the flashbacks out and you don't see the history of that person, and all you see is what he's done currently, then you can make him into a villain without that past. But with the past, with knowing what people have gone through, both in one lifetime versus, you know, generational, you know, suddenly you see choices and you see things that happen in the world, and the way that people respond, and suddenly it's like, oh, that's how I would respond. I wouldn't be trusting. I wouldn't be, you know, happy. I wouldn't, you know, feel welcome. And so I think that, again, you know, I mean, this is the 90s, and they played with kid gloves by having the Watcher cop not really be racist. He just didn't like immortals, but it was a good stand-in for, you know, right, judge, jury, and executioner cops.
Yeah, you know, interesting. One of the quotes that Duncan says, "Things are changing, Carl. All you have to do is live long enough." Still, you know, 40, 50 years later, still things pop up that feels like things haven't changed, even though they have. It just takes a few instances like this recently to say, well, you know, maybe not in certain parts, and it's a tough thing to stomach, and we're wondering if we're ever going to get to a certain place to where, you know, total acceptance and tolerance will be first and foremost in front of everyone's minds. I do want to ask you guys a couple things about the episode. So there was a weird long car ride that we've gotten a few times.
Yeah. Car ride montage.
Yes. Car ride montage. Maybe the episode was running slow. If I had any quips about it, those things kind of bug me. What about you, Norm? Did you notice that?
You know, that's the interesting thing about coming and visiting an episode that you haven't seen in a long time, after a period of time where you've hopefully that you've grown up. I think I did. But I think the point that they were trying to make in that is that Duncan is going into the streets. Duncan is going into poverty. He's checking out the other side of the tracks, you know, where people don't have it as good for whatever reason. And I think maybe it could have been a little bit shorter, because you kind of got the point after he sees homeless person, after person of color homeless person, after destitute building or bombed out whatever, with, you know, trash flying everywhere. But I think they were trying to layer in that it took a long time to find Carl, because Carl is, you know, he's on this other side of life. You know, he's not the same Carl that he thought he remembered or thought that he gave hope to back when they beat up the sheriff in the diner in the 1950s. So I think that, you know, it lent itself towards some of the world building in that episode. But the other thing that I just don't want us to gloss over is that I do think, Lee, that Carter was a racist cop and a hunter, because one of the things that he went after Ricky with a vengeance, and he all he needed to do was plant the drugs on him, and that was fine. But he you know, threw him against the fence. He almost beat him to death with a club, where the good cop stepped in, which was a really good and important thing to happen, because he became an ally for systematic change, at least for this episode. So, and by the way, Carl, Ricky, Duncan, Richie, kind of neat, huh?
Yeah. Oh, geez, dude. Mind blown.
So Ricky became kind of like this real-time analog of what it's like for a young man who doesn't have immortality, or at least we didn't know if he did or not, who was on the streets. And maybe Carter knew about that. Maybe he's like, this kid's eventually going to become an immortal. I'm going to rough him up, you know, with every chance that I get. Maybe I'm able to get one of them before they quicken. So, you know, I think that there very well may have been not just people that in Horton's squads that were, you know, hunting immortals, but there could have been just as deep-seated racists in those hunters as there were, you know, immortals of color, which we have seen in various occasions.
No, I agree.
Yeah. Interesting. When I went to on Andy Sloan's tour last year in Vancouver, visiting all the Seacouver locations from that, we spent quite a bit of time in the area of downtown Vancouver or / Seacouver, where a lot of these Carl Robinson scenes were. And it's funny because we were driving around, it's going, yeah, this is where Duncan was driving, looking for Carl, here. But that scene in that little alley where Ricky was getting beat up, we visited that scene, and also that bridge scene too, where Carl escapes Duncan the first time and jumps and then goes in there, and it's still there. It's pretty weird. But I did want to mention something, that a lot of that area down there is a heavy amount of homeless people that live down there. And it's kind of depressing. They have their own Skid Row down there, and so you know, when we were doing the tour of Vancouver / Seacouver, we saw all parts of Vancouver. We saw those parts, and we saw the very nice parts, and it is very eye opening to see, you know, that unfortunately things still haven't changed when it comes to people living on the streets and having a hard time to get by. So it's still there. So one thing I did want to mention real quick, I thought was interesting a little bit in the trivia, was that this was the first time Jim Burns sang on the show. And it also then added to him getting Joe's Place to show and have a way to showcase his singing and stuff like that. Did you notice that, Norman?
Oh, I loved it, man. His steel string on that was like, it has such a great signature element to it. Like you could have popped that into like any show, and I was like, yeah, that's Jim Burns playing. Yep.
Definitely. Well, let's head into Manhunt here. And this is where Carl Robinson has a great baseball career until he's seen killing another immortal and forced to run for his life. He asks Duncan for help. But when another man is arrested, basically takes the fall here, Duncan becomes Carl's conscience as immortal police detective Matthew McCormick pursues Carl. In a flashback to 1859 Louisiana, Carl is a runaway slave, again fleeing for his life. McCormick helps Carl, but Carl eventually kills some former slave friends of McCormick's. Real quick, Matthew McCormick was played by Eric McCormick. Probably more people know him from Will and Grace. Matthew McCormick was born in 1222 in Salisbury, England. He first died in a jousting tournament in 1255 after being run through with a lance. Norm, did you know that he was that old? I didn't realize that.
Actually, no, I don't really know too much about his immortal profile. I know that he was older. Who was his master? They say?
Cyrwin.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Celtic warrior Cyrwin. So yeah. Then he later found Corey Raines later on. But this is now the attitude that Carl has. He's still kind of a hard ass. Mm-hmm. He's a professional baseball player. He's still got he's kind of got an ego about it too. And unfortunately, he is pulled into a situation where he has to defend himself, and he does the one thing that immortal should not do, and that is not only win a fight, but do it in front of people and the normal mortals and stuff. And so that didn't quite work out well. Norman, I wanted to get your take on the character, I guess, growth of Carl Robinson, if any, in this.
Well, I think that there are just some hard personality traits to break. I mean, Carl's, he's enjoying a lot of success. He obviously has that beautiful white Lamborghini. I love that kid. He's like, man, look at that car. That car's so cool, man. I want to see that car.
As a tall guy, he would never have been able to sit in that car. I could attest to that. I got to take a ride in one when I was 13, and I was already too tall for it. And if because he's taller than Adrian,
oh yeah.
So there's no way that was actually anything he ever was able to drive.
And we never saw him drive it, so he maybe just collects it and keeps it parked.
Yeah.
Carl, it's not necessarily a sequel. Manhunt is to Nowhere to Run. It's almost kind of like if you needed to make like a 2-hour movie, this would have been kind of like the like the last 30 minutes of it, because not a lot of it was brand new, because there was some footage that was being used from Nowhere to Run.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that Carl has been trying. I think that he's been trying, and he got a little, I don't know, maybe caught up in his own success and just was enjoying being at least a celebrity athlete, which was good at the time. The one thing that kind of didn't work for me though at the beginning was the California dude, Immortal. It's like, hey man, I'm a fan, and can we sword fight? So because we for reasons. I'm like. So you have to, obviously,
yes, Bill and Ted.
I know it's like you have to move the plot along and have an Immortal fight him for some reason. I don't know why, but he just did. And it's too bad that it wasn't someone that was associated with McCormick, because I think that would have given McCormick more of a reason to hunt down Carl, because he killed another person that he cared about.
A Carter Whalen
exactly, like Harris Clay Carter relationship. So. Because he was just kind of like a know-nothing Immortal, and it would have been, I don't know, more interesting dramatically. But, Carl, like you said, he's stubborn to the point where he and Mac just have it out and trash the dojo.
Yeah.
Much to the dismay of that real weird pop-in, pop-out realtor / aerobic instructor /
Glenda, yes.
Yeah.
But overall, though, I think that, again, Carl was trying to do the right thing. I don't think there was a lot of as much woe is me in this episode, but there was a lot of, look, I tried, and every time I keep trying, somebody's going to try and tear me down. And the one redemptive part is his kind of like his white trash / alcoholic / pseudo friend / trainer, Kenny, who said that it was because of you that made my life better. And that was something that Carl wouldn't expect.
You talking about Trey Franks?
I'm sorry, Trey.
Yeah, Trey Franks. Yeah, the one who tried to take the rap.
Yeah. And he said, if it wasn't for you, I would have been nothing. I would have had no hope. I hated guys like you. Everything came easy. You have the talent, you have the looks, you get the girls, you get the cars, you get everything. But you're different, Carl. You work hard, you make people feel better around you, and that's something that was inspiring. And Carl was like, "Damn it." I was ready for you to take the fall from me, but maybe if I did this to you, somebody who has really nothing to look forward to, I can do it for another generation or several generations of people, either through athletics or through politics or through some type of leadership role. That kind of reinforces where Mac was trying to get him all along. Was it doesn't matter like where you are, you have to be a leader in order to change things. And you have the time and the ability to do it. So,
what about you, Lee? What do you think about the development of Carl's character here? And did you like where it went, the direction that it took?
I did. I did want to say that that first Immortal looked like somebody did the gender swap on Tilda Swinton. There's that whole gender swap photo thing going on Facebook right now.
Yes, it's messing with my brain big time.
I just got to say, Riker, I don't want to be thinking these feelings right now, but
I like Wilma Riker, dude.
I will say, though, I find it very funny that Kai Wynn stayed exactly the same.
Yeah.
The one thing that I think really they glossed over and they shouldn't have is they really should have come down hard on McCormick. He did rescue Carl Robinson, but he's avenging the death of a man that owned people. Mm-hmm. And the wife that he talks about, I am assuming is the same wife that got Carl killed. Or the same daughter of the plantation owner that pointed Carl out in that first episode or in the flashback and said, he's the one that got me pregnant. And that's what got Carl killed. I don't think that there's, a justification really to feel bad about those guys this many years later. I think that if there had been a way to put that mirror in front of McCormick, it would have redeemed that character a little bit more, but it was hard to watch him and feel any sympathy. He's very slick and very smooth, a cool and compelling guy to watch. The accent's great. But there was a lost opportunity to kind of deal with that part, because there's no reason to have been merciful to that family, because they were still going to go on beating and owning people and killing them if they felt like it. I don't see a justification for McCormick's character, and I think that the amount of time that McLeod spent reasoning with him about it could have been spent dealing with, like, yeah, you married a woman that got a man killed, rather than tell the truth about who she slept with. Because obviously Carl didn't get her pregnant. He couldn't have.
They didn't ever brought that up either. And I was waiting for that to happen. Like, I wanted McCormick to say, you couldn't have gotten her pregnant.
Yeah.
I know.
You're immortal. We can't have children.
Yeah.
Regarding the young immortal that we spoke of earlier in the beginning, that Carl takes his head, Aaron Pearl, who played Corman, the immortal whose death triggered Carl's woes, he went on to play a younger General Hammond in Stargate SG-1 and appeared alongside Peter Wingfield as another member of Stryker's Elite Force in X-Men 2.
Okay.
The actor Eric also had continued his career doing a lot of character acting as well. So there you go. Regarding Eric McCormick, playing McCormick here in this, I want to ask you guys about this. So he was a jobbing actor at the time, and I'm getting this information from John Mosby's book here. And at the time of his appearance, what was then known as the likes of guest spots, he was on like The Commish, Lost World, Street Justice. His first breakthrough was as Clay Mosby, a great surname, in the Lonesome Dove miniseries, and his work as a complex character who didn't realize he was a bad guy, so on and so forth. Then he got the attention of the Highlander team. Though he didn't know it at the time, the part was written with him in mind. Again, the surname's the clue. In 1998, he and the character of Matthew McCormick would be considered for a lead role in a potential Highlander series spinoff.
Yeah.
The concept of an immortal cop who had the time and purpose to track serial killers was rich with possibility. However, fate intervened. McCormick was prevented from taking the role when his new pilot was picked up by a series. It was called Will and Grace. I wanted to ask you guys a couple of things about this. You can tell the amount of time that McCormick gets in this, that, when you're trying to, I've seen it in television series before, when you're trying to prime someone for a spinoff, they get a certain amount of screen time, interesting backstory, and so forth. First of all, do you think a spinoff with this character, this cop, would have worked? Would you have wanted to have seen that? And my second part of the question is, why couldn't we have gotten a Carl Robinson spinoff instead? Norm?
I think it would have worked because, cop type shows were, they're pretty big in the late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, wasn't that like the rise of things like, LAPD? I was about to say LAPD Blue. Yes.
Yeah.
Or NYPD Blue, I should say. A cop, the serialized fiction. So it could have worked. I mean, he's a good looking dude. He can play a lead pretty much with ease. With Carl though, being the spinoff and lead of a show, I'm not sure. And then again, this just because, this is network TV, how hard it took for Star Trek, like the most technically, quote unquote, the most, open-minded type of program that the networks would even consider putting a black person in the center chair of a series. You know how long that took to get Avery Sisko into the command chair. So I don't know.
He wasn't even a captain when he started.
Nah, he was a commander. And so I don't know. Not that they say that it couldn't, but when usually, at least in that time, when you're getting, black actors on TV, they were either, one of kind of like three plugins. I don't want to say stereotypes because they're not really stereotypical all the time, but, you had like Family Matters, which kind of had like the jolly kind of like suburban dad. You had Urkel, who's hugely popular, but he was a comedic and, an off-time comedic type character. Or you'll have somebody like someone on Law and Order or CSI or something like, again, like another cop serial or law serial, right? So can, an African American black actor can he lead a science fiction fantasy show? Do we have any precedent that happened up until that point? Aside from Cisco, not really, right? I mean, support actors, sure, but not in a center role, not where you have network dollars, on the line for advertisements and so. So,
well, a few years ago when Black Panther came out, I'm a huge Marvel nerd, so I went to see opening night like I do with all of them, and none of the theaters had in any way been prepared for it to be a success, especially not the success that it was. But I went to see it again the following Tuesday for $5 AMC Tuesdays, and they're not promoting the podcast. I just like doing it. They were out of popcorn. They were out of plain M&Ms. They were out of a whole bunch of stuff. They didn't have hot dogs left at the concession stand. They were not prepared for it to be successful. And if it's a good story, people end up watching it, case in point, Deep Space Nine. But we are still in this mythology that you can't sell that show, despite you bring up Family Matters. It was a very successful show. Cosby, unfortunately, its legacy has been destroyed, but very successful show. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Name anybody in our generation that can't sing every word to the main theme song, not necessarily the whole thing. Yeah, exactly.
Go Norman.
But people keep on talking about making black movies like it's this risk. And it's really proven time and time again that it's not. Even Blade, what was that, 1997, 98? Nobody's prepared for that to be just the huge moment that it was. And if somebody had gambled on it, I think that the actor that plays Carl Robinson really could have brought that character to life, and I think it would have been great. I think the idea of that spinoff is probably better than what the Raven pilots that basically season 6 was. I think it was a much more solid beginning backdoor pilot than anything that they did in 6. But
come on, even Two of Hearts. Come on, Two of Hearts was awesome.
Two of Hearts is okay. Yeah.
Alex Raven.
Yeah. The quickening in the river was quite nice. But with I think that the cop show would have worked just because we have this show, which is first season is really. Batmac, as the guys over on the Rewatch podcast call it. You've got Angel, which is another immortal crime fighter. You've got Forever Knight, same thing.
True.
And, a bunch of that had worked. I don't know that you could have kept it, obviously, McCormick is not the Highlander, but I don't know how well it would have worked within the Highlander universe because, if these guys were so bad, why didn't he get them in the past? Maybe.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of that's still predicated on the romance of the Highlands. There's something about just saying the name Highlander that brings these kind of like these mental images of these kind of like the sweeping Highland hills and the fog banks and the bagpipes. Yeah. It's very romantic. I mean,
rustic and noble.
Exactly. And obviously a warrior culture and a culture that has to fight oppression. The oppression of the English. Mm-hmm. But if they wanted to make the worst argument I ever heard for having for not doing the Mythos and Joe show, which they should have, Indiscretions, was literally the pilot of the Mythos and Joe show.
It was a good episode.
Right? It was a good episode. Yeah. Those guys obviously had the most amazing chemistry that could have continued on. You already had Mythos and Joe well established. Here's what they said about that. They said that Mythos doesn't have enough backstory.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, guys.
I know. Everyone roll your eyes.
Literally from the dawn of time, he came. He's that guy. How do you? Oh, come on.
I want to talk about a quote that David Abramowitz said in John Mosby's book here. But before we do that and get into our final thoughts, I want to take a quick break here and let people know what else is happening on the Fandom Podcast Network. Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to our other awesome shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, our weekly pop culture podcast. Couch Potato Theater, our podcast celebrating our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a whole year in movies. The End Zone, our NFL podcast. Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast. The Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville podcast. Hair Metal, the 1980s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our Doctor Who podcast. Lethal Mullet, a 1980s action film podcast. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast, and our newest show, Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. You can enjoy all of these great Fandom Podcast Network shows on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The FPNet can also be found on the Podbean app. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on Apple Podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, and now iHeartRadio. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can also email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom. All right, welcome back to Highlander Blood of Kings podcast here, talking about Carl Robinson, and I want to talk about Bruce Young a little bit here, guys. I want to sing his praises. I want to ask you a couple things, but I want to read something that came in John Mosley's book here regarding what David said. It says, Bruce A. Young, quote, Bruce A. Young was just wonderful in this, David Bramwitz remembered. He had such a physical presence on the screen, and it was a terrific story. Also, whenever I see Southern footage of Bruce playing Carl Robinson in Louisiana in the 1920s, I just remember that Jim Burns bought some wonderful music to use over that. I like this episode because it was about something. This is regarding Manhunt. As mentioned previously, this is one of the few times that the N-word was used in the show. Fully understandable given that the time frame and context, but it's a word that still resonates uneasily and is always likely to cause discussion over usage. Does David think that there would have been more notes from the powers that be over such an issue if made today? He says, quote, I don't think so, he offered. I think there have been so many productions that touch on this time. Look at the Oscar-winning 12 Years a Slave. People understand that it was the wording of the time, and it's not done in a disrespecting way to the audience. It would have actually felt wrong if they didn't use that word in context. Norm, did you think that using the N-word in the 1990s during a show like this, do you think it was important?
Absolutely. And I think it was absolutely the right time to use it at that scene because you wanted to sell that the Hobart men, Seth, and the father and the son were these racist, slave-owning, bigoted, evil people. And when you say the word, when you say the N-word, on TV, when it's not, like I said, remember the whole Bacon theory? If you keep using it, Tarantino movies is ubiquitous. You're just like, okay, that's just another piece of where he could like write something more clever. But in this case, when they said it, you're like, bury that MFer, bury him, because that's exactly what Carl's right. Carl's right. And you hammer that point home. So you become invested in the emotional content of that scene. You become invested in like, yep, I'm on Carl's side. And then you grow with the character over time saying that, you know what, I understand what he did, but now you got to go a different way. Now you got to separate that self from your violent past, Carl, and move towards a better future for yourself. You've done that. You made your point. And you and Matthew got to kind of like reconcile because you guys can't go to war like this over something that was resolved, with the abolition of slavery. Mm-hmm. So I think that was, again, it was at the right point at the right time. And if they used it either before in Run for Your Life or either earlier on in this episode, I think it would have been a wasted opportunity to make a really good statement. And I think it was done just right.
What about you? What do you think, Lee?
Yeah, I agree. It's, the overuse of it, growing up a white kid in the Midwest, it was not a word I was unfamiliar with. I'm ashamed to say. I learned that it was not a good thing to say. And as soon as I started, meeting people that word directly hurt, I started realizing that, this is not something to be thrown around. And it was ubiquitous. I mean, this is the 90s. We're talking about gangster rap. Some of the best music to, and most original music to come out. You would have people be like, well, why can they say it? It's like, well, because they're not hurting each other when they say it. But when somebody like me says the word, it comes from a position of, if nothing else, societal power. And it does not sound good coming out of my mouth. It does not sound right. Nobody feels that it's right. And I think that's why the power of using it in this case, especially in that time frame, in that period, establishing that is a bad person. I think it also kind of goes to the, we kind of have the argument, oh, you couldn't make Blazing Saddles today. And I think you could, because none of the people that used the N-word were good people. And none of the people that it was said about were caricatures. They made fun of the caricatures. They're like, they constantly are like, this is ridiculous. I mean, I think that's the brilliance of Blazing Saddles, is that you can, and then you have that little homophobic thing at the end, but you can only be so woke in the 70s. But it's still, I think the power of using it, I think it was as an actor, I have turned down roles that have required me to say it. I don't want that video to exist, no matter how well I can explain it. It's just one that I don't know how to say it in a way that, as an actor, people would believe me as the bad guy or believe that I would say it. And I don't know that my friends who that word applies to or is meant to apply to would be able to hear it coming out of my mouth and not wonder. So it's tricky, and it is like bacon. You can't have it all the time, and it's kind of bad for you.
Yeah. Well, before we get into our final thoughts here, I want to celebrate Bruce A. Young here. And I wanted to give a little background on his career. He's best known for his role as Captain Simon Banks in the UPN science fiction police drama The Sentinel. Young also had roles in Risky Business, Jurassic Park 3, Color of Money, Basic Instinct, Into Temptation, Undisputed, and Enough. His other television roles included parts in 21 Jump Street, ER, Highlander, of course, Quantum Leap, NYPD Blue, X-Files, Cold Case, Lady Blue, Ghost Whisperer, Grey's Anatomy, and Prison Break. As television writer and screenwriter, Young had written for such television series and films as ER and The Lord Protector, The Riddle of the Chosen. This is what I like about his background here, and I did not know this. From 1983 to 1987, while with the Organic Theater Company in Chicago, Young created, produced, and was a cast member in Dungeon Master, a fusion of improvised theater and live-action role-playing. Each show was a fantasy adventure scenario with theater cast members playing the monsters and non-player characters, and volunteer audience members serving as the player characters. Young restarted the Dungeon Master in Los Angeles in 2001, where it's still active, although Young stopped active participation in 2006. How cool is that? Norman, I wanted to get your take on Bruce himself. He is probably, in my opinion, one of my favorite guest stars in the Highlander TV series. Mm-hmm. He owns this role. He's great. I'm going to ask the hard question here, though. Could you have imagined anyone else in that role other than Bruce?
It's hard to say. I mean, because I didn't really know a lot about Bruce A. Young, right? To separate himself from all the other Bruce Youngs out there, right? Mm-hmm. Bruce A. Young. We made fun of that, I think, when we first covered Nowhere to Run for Your Life before. He's imposing. He's very physical. Obviously, you could tell that he's doing a lot of his own stunts, especially when he was running from the lynchers. Back in the flashback, you could see him fall, trip, splash in the mud, things of that nature. That some actors, they won't sign on for whatever reason. And he threw himself into that part. I mean, you believe that he was Carl from the slave days, Carl from the 1950s, and Carl from the from the racist streets of Seacouver. You believed every part of him, and that's what made him really, really special. And I think that he just played off of Adrian really well, especially in my favorite scene in that episode where Adrian, or when Duncan kind of slams him to the hood of the car, and he says, you can be anything you want to be. you can achieve your dreams as you have enough time to do it. And most people will will grow old and die before they can do that. But you have the ability to do that. Why are you throwing this away? Right. I think that's probably, aside from the fact that it's an amazing, just an amazing gift to have, it's probably one of the most signature tenets of Highlander, is that with enough time and enough desire, you have the ability to change and make something better, or do something better for yourself or for society, the society that you are going to live in for the rest of your life. Right. So it's either like there in Seacouver, or I said, when he died at the end of Manhunt, he could go off to the Philippines. He could go off to, Russia. He could go to anywhere, and do something, change somebody, right? Because he's lived a life of struggle, because he's lived a life of a lot of hardships that are very common to a lot of people throughout the world, lives of poverty, hardship, struggle. And I think that he could have done something about that. But he just comes by it so honestly as an actor. He comes by the character of Carl Robinson so honestly. It's rare to see a guest star slip into that skin as quickly as he did.
Good point. What about you, Lee? What do you think about Bruce A. Young? I am struggling trying to think of anyone that could have played that role except him.
Bruce Young, you got to respect anybody who can stay in the business that long. He's what we call a journeyman actor. He's just been doing stuff since the early 80s. I think the most recent credit he has is from 2018. And as an actor, I respect that. As far as, what Norm was saying about the ability to play one character in these different roles, because, who he is in the present is not going to be who he was as a slave, or as a sharecropper in the 1920s, or as a baseball player in the 50s. I think the brilliance in his performance was finding just enough notes that you can recognize where he's at as a person, without going, way over the line, similar to Robert Downey Jr.'s character in Tropic Thunder. Where you really have to overplay every possible stereotype. It was really done with subtlety, but still recognizable. And that is a very hard line to cross. And the only performance that I can think of from that time period really was Denzel in Malcolm X, playing Malcolm as several different people. Obviously who he became, but it was not just the picture that we know of him from, with the glasses and the suit and everything. There is the before, there is the after. When he goes on his final Hajj, the difference in that man. And then it takes and yet you still know it's the same character, and it's not just because the same actor is playing it. Like, you can see how this person was in the past. And I think that's an incredible mark for an actor to be able to do something like that, especially stretched out over that much time, and still recognize not the actor Bruce Young, but the character of Carl Robinson. I think that's a really remarkable thing. And literally the only person that I could think of being able to do it is one of the best actors, as you said, of the last 30 years on previous podcast, putting Denzel and Hanks up together.
Denzel Washington, yeah.
And it's there probably were a few people that could have done it, but I'm perfectly fine with this being the performance that we received. I think this was nuanced, subtle. It was one that I didn't think about as much when I was a kid, but now coming back to it, especially now coming back to it, there aren't easy answers. And I will say it's also bringing this character in as, in a way, the antagonist of both episodes, and not being an enemy.
Right.
I think because he's very antagonistic with Charlie.
Right.
He's very antagonistic with McCormick, and McCormick's not really the bad guy. The only actual bad guy died in the basically right after the opening credits. And to have that nuanced of a show for, we all love this show, but to do something that nuanced for something that we watched at 10 o'clock or later on a Saturday night when it was first coming out, and was not even on a regular network. It was, syndicated.
Right.
I think it shows a lot of bravery and really good writing and very good acting.
Well said, Lee. By the way, Lee, how tall are you?
6'7".
Well, you're a little bit taller than Bruce is. Bruce is 6'4", so there you go.
Yeah.
All right. As we wrap this up, first of all, thank you guys both for coming on. Norm, you brought this topic to the table. I wanted to get your final thoughts on this, and I'm really happy that you did because I really enjoy both these episodes. I enjoy this character. When I look back on all of the wonderful guest stars that this TV series has had and how this TV series has extended the Highlander mythology and this world that we just all love so much. Carl Robinson is up there at the top as one of my favorites. I want you to give the table here. Let us know your final thoughts on this and how you feel about where these episodes stand in your Highlander, mythology of favorites and stuff like that.
Well, I'm glad that Manhunt, was able to kind of bookend Carl's story because I always wanted to see him come back. I love Run for Your Life. It has, again, one of my favorite scenes of all time in that episode. And I'm glad that he was able to at least kind of either continue his story or at least give a soft bookend to his story, considering that it could have been something that could have developed further down the road. That being said, I think that this is just one of those stories, more Run for Your Life than Manhunt, that just really reflects how things in, when did this come out? 1993, probably? 93?
93, yes. The
93?
first one, Run for Your Life, yeah. Yep.
So that's 93, 2003, 2013. We're looking at, over almost 30 years of that same type of situation that's happening today. It was happening then. It was happening in the writing then, and it was very prominent. I mean, those cops, they weren't just Keystone cops. I mean, they were going after these two black men, Ricky and Carl, pretty much with a vengeance, and Ricky too. I mean, I think that's why it's not just Carl that was getting roughed up, because he could just heal, even though he's really healed slowly in this episode as from immortal standards. But not Ricky. Ricky was kind of like an innocent. And that's what makes Carl so sympathetic. Is like he could have been the hard man of the streets, completely shutting himself out from normal society and just being on the edge. But no, he wanted to actually do good by certain people, Ricky being one of them. He saw a kid on the street. He wanted to take him in, just like Duncan took in Richie. That's why I make that parallel. He was basically Richie. And he said, you know what? I got to do something, because I can't let these young men who don't have the gift that I have get roughed up by cops whenever cops want them to. I mean, think about it this. When those bystanders, like late at night, when Carl was getting followed by Carter in a cop car, and he ran him into that alleyway, he ran him over in front of people. Yeah. I mean, that's writing in 1993. I mean, that's pretty significant when it comes to the what this episode and the statement that it's making. So that's why, aside from the positive aspects of this episode, there are systematic icons of the problem that still exists today in this episode. And it has to do with innocent black men being literally hunted down by police. Now, that's not the reason solely why I wanted to bring this to light. It's because I think it's well acted, it's well produced, and it has a great message. I wish Manhunt was just as strong, but I think it lost. I agree with Lee. I think it lost a little bit of putting McCormick on the judgment table. I think that he could have learned a lot more from the past the way Carl did, and maybe they could have learned a lot about each other again as master and student. I think that was some opportunity that was lost. But at the same time, though, it makes a great, cutting out the repetitive flashbacks at the beginning, it would have made a great 2-part edited hour and 40-minute movie. Just showing that, it would be amazing if they cut it down like the way they did, like Best of Both Worlds on Star Trek, like what's the one with Gold Madrid? They're off all lights.
Oh yes.
Gosh.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah.
So pardon me. Oh, sorry. Chain of Command 1 and 2.
Chain of Command. Yes.
So it would have made how they cut down the 2-parters, say Unholy Alliance and Finale, and those episodes, the technical 2-parters.
Right.
This one could have been one of those movies if they really wanted to do that.
Because
that's a good point.
It's such a great continuation of one character. You rarely do you see that, with the exception of Amanda. But hers aren't really continuation stories. Hers are just kind of let's drop Amanda in and have fun with Duncan. This is really encapsulating both. So I hope people, when they get a chance to see these 2 episodes, take a kind of a different viewpoint, and it may affect you differently. It affects me differently today because there's so much going on that it's hard to watch. And Lee, you're right. You started at ground zero of this, at least of the current movement of Black Lives Matter, and I can't even imagine, how you've been able to kind of just absorb all this. So I'm done talking. I really want to hear what Lee has to say about what's going on in Minneapolis with this.
Yeah, go ahead, Lee.
Wow, thank you. It was very hard not to be very angry for quite a while. I actually recorded 2 episodes for Couch Potato Theater the week that all this went down. The night that we got the video of George being murdered, I recorded with a good friend of mine at Couch Potato Theater for V for Vendetta, and then seeing similar parallels to other things going down. And then a few days later, doing Black Panther with a couple friends of mine, one who was in Black Panther as an extra or stunt extra, and then a friend who's a expert in African martial arts. He's actually a mutual friend of RJ's as well. And watching...
Not Roberto.
What's that?
Roberto?
No, Damon.
Okay.
He was the host of not Forged in Fire, the other sword
Is it
show.
Knife or Death?
No, but he was on Knife or Death.
Okay.
He was on episode 2, but Man at Arms on the Spike Network. So,
right, yeah.
But and while we were doing that, my buddy Babatunde, who lives here in the cities, we were getting text updates while we were recording, and we had decided, because of the importance of what was going on, we would kind of go through the whole episode. But in kind of listening to it and trying to edit it, I'm realizing how many things were happening in our city. And then the next day, I was on the 35W bridge on a protest that we had cleared with the city. The mayor was on his way to meet us on that bridge. We were on that bridge for 20 minutes with no traffic coming in either direction. And I had hopped over the divider because we have a beautiful downtown, and I've always wanted to take a picture from the bridge of the downtown skyline. There's just no way to do it because it's a very busy highway. And so I hopped over to take that. And as I'm getting somebody to take my picture, I hear screams and people start running towards me. And then I'm seeing clouds of gas, and I got people away. We didn't know what was going on. I heard a whole lot of different rumors. Treated a lot of people treated people that had tear gas in their eyes. You learn how to deal with it in basic. And that put me in a very angry place for a while. And then I discovered volunteering. I went to the places that needed help, that needed a strong back, needed somebody to watch while they slept. And it's very easy to be angry in times like this, especially when you're a front row witness to what's happening to people and who's committing it. But finding a way to try to help people, to try to make them feel safe, to try to make them feel not alone, has really been helping me. At one point I was angry enough that if I had followed through just on my emotions, not even on any given plan, I would have ended up on the news. Because once again, I'm a 6'7" behemoth with a lot of very interesting skills. But that wouldn't have helped anybody. But handing out food at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church in St. Paul helped me with that. Helping board up businesses that had burned and gotten looted helped me with that. And I will say that you can stand with the people that are protesting and rioting and still be sympathetic to the businesses that have been hurt. And I have seen hundreds of people on both sides of the argument, and I know businesses who still stand with the people protesting that have been burned to the ground. And I'm not saying I know of them, I know them. I've actually been in their shops. I have helped sweep, I have helped board up, I have helped find things that can be salvaged. So I know that in discussing with our fans, I know that not everybody out there has the same viewpoint on this as I do. And you don't have to agree with me. I wish that you would, but as Norm was saying earlier, not 100% right, not completely wrong when you're talking with the fans. The one thing you can do is go be nice to somebody. Go help people that need help. Even if you don't have anybody that's affected by the riots or anything in your area, go to a neighborhood that you wouldn't normally go to and volunteer. Shake people's hands, because you can be that agent of change. You don't have to be Duncan MacLeod, breaking up a lynching to help people, to save them. If you see a lynching, definitely break it up, but go be nice. Be the face that gets associated with people like yourself. And I'm sorry to soapbox, but this is the first time I'm actually getting to voice a lot of this. And I have a lot more hope now than I did a couple weeks ago. I have a lot less anger now than I did after the bridge. And it's come from being nice to people. It's, as much as I argue on Facebook, like everybody else does these days, I still care about people, and I still love the community that I'm a part of. I'm still active politically, socially, all that. So, just find a way to be nice to people, everybody. You don't even need to agree with me. Tell me how horrible I am. Just go be nice to somebody. That's all I got to say.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences on that, Lee. I can't imagine what you went through, and some of the stuff that you're sharing is the first time I'm hearing it, and it's powerful. And I'm very proud of you. I really am. You had an opportunity to lash out. You had an opportunity to be destructive. You had an opportunity to hurt people, but you didn't. And you learned something about yourself, or you dived deep inside and pulled something out. And you set a very good example of what you can do to be productive and to help. And so thank you for doing that, and thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Lee, thank you. And Norm, just want to give you any final things you'd like to say.
Well, I was kind of hoping that I would at least hear Lee say I like the episode, but
I love the episode. Come on, man.
I'm just
not like we reviewed The Zone.
I know. It's like, It's hey, Kevin. Lee, is The Zone like Highlander's Threshold? Is that what that episode is?
Pretty much, yeah. Threshold, yes.
Sooner or later.
You're talking about the famous Voyager episode, right? Yes.
Well, first of all, I do this sometimes on our Patreon mission log feed. It's like sometimes John and I get so heavy into like the morals, meanings, and messages, and these two episodes have scores of that. But you just kind of have to find a way to bust our own tension, because it just gets so heavy. But dude, I really do admire what you've done, Lee. I mean, you and I have done martial arts, and Kevin, you've understood martial arts up to a point where martial arts is kind of like it's the way that we refocus our energy, right? It's the way you can take energy. Energy cannot be either destroyed nor created, just transferred into one form or another. Now you can take that energy and do destructive things, or you can take that energy and do constructive things. So, or you can hold that energy inside you, and it does one of two things. It either does something negative or positive to you internally, both spiritually and mentally. So one of the things that I think that was a great example, Lee, is that you took that energy and did something positive with it. You had to find outlets to do that. That energy created change. It created kindness. It created empathy and sympathy. And you went out there and affected people's lives in a positive manner. That's how we need to operate moving forward. If you feel like you can't do something because you don't have either the money to do it or the time to do it, a thank you, a smile, a handshake. I walk in and out of pavilions with people who are literally have to clean up every single handrail with disinfectant because they have to protect their customers. Those people are putting themselves at risk. A thank you or a kind word is also important to them too. Even if they're not on the front lines, they're on the front lines of COVID. Those people are dealing with the safety of everybody every day. There's always something that you can do as long as you're willing to do it, as long as you're willing to put yourself aside for a moment and think about what everyone else is going through. That's who we are as human beings. That's the kind of state of the world that we need to get to. And the only way we can do that is to do what Lee did, pause in that moment and reflect on what you think you're going to do. I had a friend call me. He said after one of my Babylon 5 shows, he says, "Norm, I don't know what to do. I'm so angry. I don't know what to do." And I just said, just stop. Just stop. Just stop and sit in silence for 15 minutes. That's all you need to do. You're letting too many things come at you too organically, and it's getting you emotionally stirred up in so many different directions. But you're not listening to what you want. You're not listening to the direction of your own person. Just silence yourself. Silence everything around you. Turn everything off and just sit in silence and just pause. That can do you a world of good. And I think that somewhere along the line, that's what Carl was able to do because of Duncan. He was able to pause, right? He was able to pause in the 200 years that, of his existence and just say, you know what? This is my time to do something about it. This is my time to be able to change again, But for some people who don't have immortality, for those who can't pause, that'll be the last time that they make a decision for themselves. And you could either go one way or the other way. You can either affect more change or make a stand and affect only one significant portion of change in your life, because that could be the end. I would vote for more change because it can do more good and you can affect more people and over a longer period of time. And I think that's just, again, give yourself the reason, the meaning, the time, and the ability to do it, and you'll be able to affect the change that you need to make in your life. So that's my soapbox. I did like the episode too.
Norman, first of all, thanks again talking Carl Robinson, Run for Your Life, and Manhunt. It's good to have you come visit old Bloody King's stomping grounds again, my friend.
Place looks good. Joe's a little thin on the old bar stock there, but I don't know.
Well, he hired a real drunk to replace you, so I've been drinking it down.
Tell Mike to restock, or I'll send Joe a strongly messaged word of letter and stuff. I'll just show up with my own bottle.
And Lee, my co-star, of course, and now your co-star, yes, co-host here at Bloody Kings. Thank you again for bringing your personal experiences here to Bloody Kings, man. I really appreciate that.
This is really cool. I've been a fan of you guys forever, and to have our first 3-person episode be something this important and this personal, and meaningful, timely. I'm amazed. I am proud and honored to be in Norm's chair. I'm proud and honored to be your co-host, and I can't wait to see what we do next.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that very much. I'm Kevin, and on behalf of Lee and my very special guest, Norman Lao, thanks everyone for listening, and join us again next time here on the Fandom Podcast Network for another episode of Bloody Kings, a Highlander podcast. Lee, Norman, that sensation you are feeling is a quickening. We are one. we are brothers. Goodbye, everyone.